Guys, welcome back to the OHA and some more wonderful content courtesy of this wonderful box right here. Absolutely thrilled to have our hands on this. I wanted to take some time and go through some of this beautiful book here. I wanted to go over some of the changes and some of the new rules, changes to existing rules, powers, special strikes, all that fun stuff. So I'm gonna do it a little different. I'm basically gonna talk. So I mean, if you're paying, throw this on. You can have a listen, whatever you want to do. What I want to touch on first, obviously, is the aesthetics of the book. It's a beautiful book, hardcover, obviously. It's gonna fit well in with the Battle Company's book, as well as the There and Back Again book. Very similar spine look to it. It's got that wonderful text. It's going to look excellent on a bookshelf. Really pleased with it. The artwork that they've chosen is very fitting. Each section, I'll show you this quick, got a stunning full color map. Each section is sort of denoted by these beautiful rings with a particular choice of artwork that all seems very fitting, given the context of whatever section they're showing off. So it's got some nice quotes. The picture selection, even outside of those rings, is also really nice. There's some pictures that I know I haven't seen before. General feel of the book after sitting down and reading it and perusing and flipping, and it really feels like this was a deep dive into the game. There was a serious rework, but done from a place of love. You can tell just by the layout, just by the choices in the artwork, as well as the quotes, that they really wanted to portray that deep love that we all share and have for Tolkien and the world of Middle Earth. So definitely get that feeling when you're looking at the book. It's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. The colors, the most important rule, Bilbo here, like it's absolutely gorgeous. I know that's hard to focus there, guys, but just really well laid out. Beautiful examples. They've broken it down really well, taken all the good stuff that was in the original rule book, brought it on over, obviously, and then we've done some tweaks. So you have to forgive me, I have a few notes that I'm going to need to read off on this. There's so many things that have changed that I would say it really shows that the Middle-earth team had their finger on the pulse of the community, to be sure. The changes that have been made are definitely things that I think we all, if you're existing within the community, can agree on. There's been massive amounts of discussion on, and a lot of these issues are definitely something that a lot of people felt needed to be addressed. Not that they made the game bad by any means, but they've struck a great balance. They've rebalanced the game, I think, addressed some of those major concerns. Obviously, when things like this happen and you get new rules and you get new rebalancing, it may throw something else out of balance. So only time's going to tell. Obviously, give guys some time with these rules, get playing. I know there was a gentleman on the Ontario OSBGL site that had said give them a few weeks and they'll figure out how to break them. Not really sure why we'd want to break them, but it's going to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see what the new changes are going to be, how they balance the game, and if it does in fact open up any more imbalance to the game. Basic mechanics have pretty well stayed very similar. One of the bigger ones I noticed was weapons war gear, something called a hand and a half weapon. So basically it allows you to choose whether you're fighting single-handed or two-handed. Gives characters with that style of weapon some great diversity, to be sure. And I think these are definitely geared to sort of like the elven blades, things of that nature. So you'll have to have a look at that. As I said, I'm going to go over these fairly vaguely. I don't want to get into too much detail. Some of the ones I'll straight out say because I'm excited about, but I don't want to have it as a massive spoiler where you don't even, you need to get the book and read it. It's a great read. So get out there and get it. Changing weapons, which was a big one for me. It's now going to cost you a point for a warrior and 5 points for a hero. So let's say, for example, that hero has a sword and you want to give him an axe. That's going to cost you 5 points. It has to remain the same class of weapon. So if it's a single-handed weapon, it's got to be another type of single-handed weapon. You can't go, you know, give a guy a two-handed weapon when he was only originally intended to have a single-handed weapon. Which I think makes sense. It's really good. After the war gear, obviously, that brings us into something that I think was definitely one of the major issues, and that is the special strikes. So there's a bunch of different changes in the special strike section that is well worth the read. Piercing strike in particular is one that interests me. Your strength only goes up by 1 when you do a piercing strike. You still go down to defense D3, but you only go up strength of 1, so that is very handy and I think appropriate. It makes a lot of sense. You know, it's definitely not out in left field. I know that particularly when you were fighting something, particularly of a small stature, whether you're talking a goblin or you're talking a hobbit, something of that nature, the original piercing strike was a little much. So excellent source of rebalance there. I'm very happy with that. Slight change to feint. I guess fairly large change to feint. The only time you're going to use feint is when it's equal to or higher as far as fight value goes. So you're not going to have, you know, a lowly goblin feinting on Aragorn, which I think is completely accurate. Stun is also one that's changed. And the only change that I noticed to that one was for when you're using it against monsters, the roll is now a 6 instead of a 5 up to stun that monster, which I think makes sense. That's, you know, that's not something that I don't think too many people are going to argue. Let's put it that way. What else? I was kind of jumping all over the place here, just writing down things. Of course, heroic actions. These have been shared on the Warhammer community site, and then of course every platform going has had them up. The new ones that I can pull out right now are Heroic Resolve, Heroic Defense, Heroic Strength, and Heroic Challenge. Basically, I'll let you guys go and look those up. You can find the information yourself. I don't want to muddy the waters on my interpretation of them, but I think they do add some great depth to the game. You know, and especially now that the heroic actions are going to be tied into the tier of your hero, so that's going to dictate what heroic actions you have access to. I think it's really going to round out the game well. You know, and it's gonna make characters and heroes worth their points now, because you're not going to have, let's say, Dane Ironfoot being tied up for an exorbitant amount of time with a lowly captain for whatever reason. You know, there's so many different things, so many ways that you can work around stuff. It's there's so much depth, let's put it that way. So I know a lot of friends of mine, particularly within the OHA, have always said this game is very easy to play and it's difficult to master, or almost impossible to master if you're me. And that's going to add to that. I mean, very simple, straightforward rules. There's no problem following the rules. It's figuring out when and how to use them that is going to be huge. So really interested to see how this changes the lay of the land in the competitive scene in Canada. See how guys handle these new rules, you know, what the new strategies are going to be. It's such an exciting time. We've got Monstrous Powers, big one for me, massive. Anybody who's watched any of our battle reports knows I am not a fan of the current iteration of Hurl, and I'm happy to say that has been balanced. It is nowhere near as devastating as it was. Basically, employing Hurl now, you are going to have to be very tactical, and placement is going to be huge, absolutely huge. You know, and it's going to make it's definitely still a devastating attack, but it's nowhere near open to the abuse that it was during this current or previous iteration of the game. You know, so I'll let you guys jump in on that. But Hurl, in my opinion, has most certainly been fixed. There is a new War Beast section within the rules, and that covers basically the biggest creatures on Earth, the Mummic, Great Beast of Gorgoroth, covers the movement, all that fun stuff. You know, for those who don't have the models or whatever, you want to look it up, you can have a look through and see what kind of rules they got. Breakpoint, there's no more rounding up. So I guess there was some confusion somewhere that, you know, when you had an odd army number, you know, whether you were, what your model count was going to be, all that's taken care of now. If the army, let's say for example, is 17 models, that would put your break at 8.5. It just becomes an 8. You don't round. It becomes an 8. You just drop the point. The half doesn't matter. So I guess that's intended to simplify some stuff, which I guess if there was problems with figuring out break and stuff like that, then so be it. So that has been rectified. Of course, one of the biggies. I'll show you this one. Well, I mean, I won't show you it, but we can have a look. This one right here. This is one that I think has had the fever of the community for a while. Magic, obviously, it has been toned down. It is so much more subtle. Resisting has become easier, and when I say easier, I just mean if you get lucky and you're rolling a natural 6, basically your hero is going to regain a point of will. So it's going to add a little bit of survivability to some heroes, I think, which should be very interesting for the game. My opinion in reading it, the passive spells, so what I guess defensive spells, seem to be largely untouched. The combative spells, you know, the ones that are doing the damage, so let's say Immobilized Transfixed, Sorcerer's Blast, the spells of that ilk, they have been nerfed big time. Essentially, when you're reading through, you're going to see that in order to get the current iteration of the spell, you will have to channel it. So a non-channeled version of, let's say, Fury simply gives you an auto pass on your courage. You are no longer getting the 6+ save. If you want that 6+ save, you're going to have to channel it. So I think that's excellent. That's going to balance it out. As far as you know, whether or not it's going to be worth that point of might to do that. I would assume if you're taking somebody with Fury, you're probably going to try to do it because the 6+ save is definitely valuable. But it's nice that instead of it just costing a will point, that it's now going to cost a will and a might, which is excellent. Immobilized Transfixed, obviously, this one's great. Very happy with this, and I think a lot of people should be as well. It's just going to immobilize you. It does not have your fight or your attack value. You still do all that stuff as normal. Obviously, you're still not making strikes, but at least you're not fighting at half your fight value, which is huge. Unless, of course, he channels it. If he channels it, then you start getting into losing half your fight value and the likes. But again, that's costing him a might and a will. So it's going to be interesting to see where the balance becomes and where, you know, I think people are going to become a lot more selective on what they're spending their might and will on, given the costs associated with casting these things. Sorcerer's Blast stops at the first model struck. That's awesome. Terrific. No more blowing down a line. You know, it just makes sense. It makes sense. You know, another object hits him. It's still there. Magic's still there, but it is so subtle now. I don't want to say it's not scary, because it certainly is scary. I mean, if you get these sorcerers out there channeling this stuff, you know, you're still going to run into problems. I think the difference is that it's much more balanced, and it's going to cost them a lot more to do the big and nasty stuff, which it's going to be important, and I think it's going to change sort of. It's going to change the lay of the land huge. Like, you know, whether or not a caster is now a have to have is arguable. You know, it's so exciting. It really is. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see where they go with it. And when I say they, I mean like players. I really can't wait to see some of these lists and what the direction is going to be, how much magic's going to be used. You know, it's very, very subtle, and personally I couldn't be happier. Could not be happier. Then of course we've got the advanced rules. So again, I don't think I said this. This is a 207-page rule book, so like there's a lot of good stuff in here. And you get in, they've got all the siege rules, which is awesome for the siege engines. You've got the types of play, so you've got narrative, open play, and match play. And then of course one of the larger points that is most definitely worth talking about is the it is the heroic tiers and ally matrix. I'm not sure why I was flipping through. I have it on here, but I did want to show you some pictures. The matrix looks really, really awesome. So the alliance matrix, you're going to have a green, yellow, and red. Green is historical allies, yellow convenient allies, red is impossible allies. Green, you keep all your army bonuses. Yellow, you lose your army bonuses. Red, you lose the army bonuses as well. You do not get the benefits of any heroic actions or standfast called by your allied contingent. So you have to be of the same army to get any of those benefits. So I think this pushes people in the right direction. I think it's going to bring a lot more theme and I guess fluff back into the game, even at a competitive level, because you're going to have so many bonuses that are going to be so worthwhile. I did kind of skip heroic tiers, which I shouldn't have. You've got 5 different types. So you've got heroes of legend, valor, fortitude, minor heroes, independence, and that's them. It's basically how many guys they're going to lead in a warband. Really excited about the fact that you can now put an independent in another warband. That's going to make things really great, especially for scenarios like Maelstrom deployment and things of that nature. So just to give you an idea, your heroes of legend are going to be leading 18, heroes of valor 15, heroes of fortitude 12. Minor heroes can lead up to 6, and then of course independents lead nothing. So that's them. This is an example because there are definitely, as has been pointed out, some missing factions within the Alliance Matrix. So I'm sure the Army book will have the full matrix, but this gives you an idea of the graph I was speaking about. And basically it's going to tell you what matches up with what. So as an example, Army of Thor, Ken is a historical ally with obviously, where is it here, Garrison of Dale, as well as the Iron Hills. The only 3 others, so they would be Halls of Thranduil is a convenient ally, Lothlorien is a convenient ally, and Rivendell is a convenient ally. And then we have obviously impossible ally would be the Dead of Den Harrow, or the Fellowship. It's really interesting how they've done this. It's fairly simple to figure out. Essentially, you know, you're not going to see Hobbit era armies allying with Lord of the Rings armies. It's just something that's not going to happen. You know, obviously there'll be some exceptions to that, possibly, I would think. The first one that comes to mind would be like Iron Hills or Erebor and Durance Folk. Kind of hard to see where they wouldn't be able to ally with each other. But obviously timeline wise, it's muddied for sure. But it's going to be interesting to see what's in that army book and how it changes. Rounding this out, all 12 scenarios are in there, so even the ones that were included in the general pack. So you got the 12 scenarios. I'm not going to go through that, all the scenarios. Most of you should know them if you've been playing the game. If you're new, you're going to find out real quick. They are awesome. As well as in the back, something that was actually really, really interesting is, of course, all of the beautiful photographs of the various armies. So in typical GW fashion, you have a lot of what I would call painting resource in the back of the book here. For those of you who are new players, there's a lot of models in the back, so you can see how they need to be painted, what the color scheme is, or I mean suggested painted, obviously. But something more important than that I found most interesting was the example armies. Now, if you've got some free time and you like extrapolating information, you can try to come up with where the point values are going to land for these particular armies. Obviously, we don't know any changes to war gear, stats, profiles, anything like that. However, the fact they included this, and it shows, you know, the various point values for the troops and the captains and, you know, Denethor and whatever, is quite interesting. So definitely worth a look in the back there. Something else that I also noticed was the point values laid out for these armies are roughly around 1,000 points. You know, given the fact that we're seeing, depending on the class of hero you take, the size of the warband they're bringing going up, I'm not sure if maybe we're seeing a shift in the scale of the game. I would say that possibly that's a direction GW is maybe trying to go. Kind of supported by the fact that, you know, all of the infantry packs now are going to be 24. Well, no, I shouldn't say all, but the ones that we've seen are going to be 24 troops to a box. Your leaders are leading bigger warbands, so I'm wondering if the, I guess, creep of the game is going to maybe climb, maybe get up to 1,000 points is going to be maybe more standard within the competitive scene. I don't know. I know I would say the standard for like a premier event is going to be anywhere from 700 to 800 points, at least in what I've seen in North America. Anything smaller than that, it's usually a smaller event. I know in the Ontario scene they use a point system, so like an 80-point event would maybe be down a bit, you know, below 700 somewhere, whereas their 100-point hobby event or 100-point tournament event, you know, is generally up between the 700 to 1,000 range. Desolation of Toronto, of course, being, I think it was 1,000. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's the push, if that's the direction that we're going, is you know, we're getting a little bigger scale-wise in the game as far as number of troops. Obviously, that's something specific to match play. The open play and the narrative being what I'm most excited about to see, you know, what they're going to bring out for Pelennor. You know, if there's going to be some narrative campaigns, if there's going to be a campaign book or something of that nature, I'm excited to see. But it's interesting to see where it's going to go from here, because everything is so, it's so much the same, but it's so different. You know, there's so many tweaks, there's so many additions. It's really made the game fresh, and that's exactly what it needed. It needed to have some life breathed into it, and they have done that in a fantastic way. So that's all I'm going to cover on the wonderful, fantastic tome of knowledge right here. So thanks for joining me, guys. Get out, get your copy, and dig into this fantastic book. It is well worth the read, and it's just a beautiful book. So thanks for joining me here at the OHA. We'll catch up to you soon.